As many of you may know, Mike Anderson of Collision Advice and my publication, Crash Network, have been doing who pays for what surveys since 2005. And Mike and I had brought an idea to Aaron and to Danny at the DEG. They liked the idea and ran with it, and Aaron and Kai asked me to just spend just a couple minutes going over that. First of all, Mike asked me to apologize that he couldn't be here. As many of you know, he's on the road the 300 plus days of the year, and whatever road he's on this week apparently wasn't Denver, so he couldn't be here. And I offer you my apologies that you have to listen to me instead, because he's a much better speaker than I am. But as I said, we've been conducting who pays for what surveys 4 times a year, quarterly since 2005. Can I just ask by a show of hands how many people have taken a who pays for what survey? Great. I'm glad to see that many hands, because number one, that is what helps us generate. We're getting 900, an average of 900 shops responding to each survey. And we can only do that thanks to people like you in the room continuing to do those surveys. And it also means I don't need to spend too much time explaining the surveys, because you're mostly familiar with them. But each survey asks about 25 non-included labor operations, and asks shops taking those for the following 8 insurance companies: how regularly are you paid for that operation when it's, first of all, a necessary operation, and when you bill for it. And so we take that data and produce for each of the surveys a roughly 70-page report. And each report for each procedure has 2 pages. And this is a sample of the first one of the first page for one of the procedures. And next slide. If you up at the top, it says what the procedure is, and then we have what we call the speedometer, which basically says for this procedure, 38% of shops said they are paid always or most of the time for this particular procedure when it's needed. And then next slide, please. Then in the middle section of the page, it breaks it down by insurer. And again, in addition to saying how many shops are paid always or most of the time, it tells you how many say some of the time, how many say they have never been paid for that procedure. And this is the one that's always important to me, is what percentage have never asked to be billed, never asked to be paid for that particular procedure. So my personal opinion is, well, I'd love to see these numbers going up about the people that are getting paid always and most of the time. I'd actually rather make sure we're educating people about these procedures, and the percentage that have never asked, watch that decline if that happens. Down at the bottom, we break it down by region. Sometimes there's not much difference, sometimes there is. And then next slide. The second page at the top, next slide, breaks it down by DRP or non-DRP shop. So if you're a Geico DRP shop, we ask you how often you get paid for this procedure, and we compare that to shops that are not DRP shop for Geico, for instance. And so we've asked, in addition to these kinds of questions, we've asked shops who are taking the surveys, have you found that the surveys are helping your business? And been thrilled to see that consistently 80% or more of the people taking a survey say, yes, taking these in the past has helped my business. They tell us they're using it to train and remind their staff of non-included procedures that might need to be listed. They're also using it, they tell us, to show insurers, and in some cases even consumers, that something they're billing for is reasonable, that they're not the only one billing for it, and that they're not the only one that gets paid for it. So, but in fact, actually, Ron, something you mentioned earlier, you said one of the things you're billing for is time for OEM research. And that's one of the procedures that we actually ask about. Are you charging an administrative fee for that sort of thing? And that made me think of that. And we are seeing some change in that. This last survey, the last year, we saw that 11% of shops say they are always or most of the time being paid that fee when they try and bill it. And that was up from 7% 2 years earlier. So there is, there's movement in these that we see. I mentioned that over 80% of shops say that the surveys are proving useful. Well, if you know Mike, he's not going to be satisfied till we get that number closer to 100%. So we've been working with him over the years to try and pack more information into the survey reports to help shops use the reports. Each survey report from the beginning has included a page or two in the back called resources that has links to articles and tools and that sort of thing. The guide to complete repair planning is on that page and that sort of thing. But last year, if the next slide, please, one more. We started collecting some commentary from Mike from a lot of once he sees the results, he talks about the procedure a little bit, when it's necessary, why it's necessary, and tries to provide maybe some information that would help you if you're trying to negotiate or explain to someone who doesn't understand why it's necessary, why it is necessary. And the idea that we brought to Aaron and Danny at the DEG was that we know the DEG is a good place to, for instance, get documentation that, yes, this is a procedure that's not included in the labor times. So Danny's taking the time to take the list of close to 100 procedures that we ask about over the course of a year and find DEG inquiries that are related to those procedures. And next slide, please. That's, so what will, in the future reports with each procedure, there'll be something like this that shows actual links to some of the procedure or the DEG inquiries related to that. And then, next slide, please. Then in the report, we're doing an introductory page that will explain a little bit about what the DEG is, tell them that they can look for these procedures at the bottom of the page, and then actually next slide, actually show a sample of this is what the type of thing you're going to see if you click on any of those links to the DEG. So we think this is a good way to get the DEG in front of shops regularly. A lot of people know about it, but they might not think about it. But if they're looking at these types of reports 4 times a year, it's kind of an ongoing good reminder. And it's also a good way to get some of the great resources that are on the DEG website, another way to get them out to the industry. And next slide. If you're not involved, I know most of you raise your hand that you're taking the surveys, but if you're not involved, there's a couple ways you can do. If you're a shop, if you're not getting notifications when a survey is open, if you just send a blank email, you can do it right now, survey@crashnetwork.com. That you don't need to put anything in the email. That will tell us, we'll email you when there's a survey going on like there is right now this month. I'd hope you'll encourage others in your association or business groups or to participate in the surveys. At the end of each survey, there's a quick link that says click here, and we've got a ready-made email that you can send to somebody else that just says, I just took this survey and you should too. We get 40 to 50 new participants every survey through those referrals from people who've taken the survey, so that's really useful. And if you just take the time to do that and just maybe send it to 1 or 2 people, that'd be really helpful. You can download the results of past, download the results of past surveys either through Mike's website, collisionadvice.com, or our website, crashnetwork.com. If you're not a shop, again, if you're an association or vendors, please encourage people, if you talk about the surveys, that'd be great. We are going to be launching Who Pays for What Canada very soon, and though Mike, I think it's important that you guys understand that Mike funds these surveys out of his own pocket 100% in the US, and it's not an inexpensive undertaking, but he wanted to make sure that those reports get out to anyone who wants them, and so he pays for that. He said, I can't take on doing it in Canada as well. He's going to pick up some of the tab, but we're looking for some sponsors. So if that's something, if you do business in Canada and that's something you could help us with, I'd love to talk to you either after this or I'm always in the front row at CIC if you want to reach me there. Lastly, next slide, Aaron, if this is useful and if you think this is helpful for either for your business or for the industry, the next time you see Mike, please thank him. As I say, he's the one who makes this possible. And I hope you'll join me in thanking Aaron and SCRS and Danny at the DEG for adding this new element that we can help us add this new element to the survey reports. So thank you. I don't know if there's time for questions, if anyone has any.
So one of the statistics you talked about was the increase of shops saying that they're getting paid for stuff. Have you run into anything where an insurer maybe was at 20% of paying this one survey and the next survey they were down to 12, or if they decreased that, they've cut back on that procedure?
There has been some of that, and we have one thing to keep in mind when you look at it. In the introduction of the survey, we always calculate what the margin of error is, because look, this is a survey. This is not exact science. So the margin of error, thanks to having 900 shops or more doing these, the margin of error is, as I recall, like in the 3.5%. So it's pretty accurate, but some of the movement you see oftentimes is within that margin of error. We're actually seeing pretty consistent results, but also in the one slide that had the speedometer, there's always a little arrow right next to that speedometer that says, compared to last year, more shops are getting paid or fewer. We don't see it going down very often, and when we do, it's usually within the margin of error. But we have seen some, and I can't think of an example, but we've seen several where they're going up. We don't always, we have the data, and it's in the reports as far as looking at a particular insurer, whether they're going up or down, but that isn't something we've really dug into too much, but we could. Any other questions? Great.
Thanks, Ty.
Thanks, Ty.